Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Today I'm going to be painting the City of Absalom Pathfinder terrain set from Archon Studio. This set was sent into the channel for review purposes. And what I'm going to do in this video is find a quick and easy way to recreate as accurately as possible the look of the officially painted miniatures from the front of the City of Absalom box. The intention being to get good, clean, tabletop ready miniatures as quickly as possible so we can start building our dungeons and having fun with our friends. To get started, I have spray undercoated the terrain on the frame using Citadel Chaos Black. And once that undercoat is completely dry, we can use our faithful side cutters to start removing all of the components from the sprue. This is really easy to do, just working around the components, clipping away all of the connectors, trying to keep as flush to the miniature as possible. Once you have removed the components, you will have nubs that you will need to file down or remove with a mold line remover. That will leave little marks all around the miniature that you will then need to touch up with black paint. But before we get to that, I did just want to show you a little trick that somebody mentioned in the comments of a previous video I did on Archon Studio terrain. These pieces go together using clips. And when you are painting the miniatures, you can actually use these clips to make it easier to hold the miniature while you are painting. You just pop one clip into place, they fit really securely, and then you can hold onto that like a little paint handle whilst you paint around it. You can do exactly the same thing with the walls, and then when you are leaving the wall to dry between coats of paint, it will just stand upright so it's not going to stick to your painting table or anything. It's just a handy little thing you can do to make painting a little bit easier. Anyway, like I said, we are just going to overpaint all those little connector points that we have filed down. I'm just going to use some Abaddon Black for this. It doesn't matter if it doesn't match up with the Chaos Black undercoat completely. With that done, we're going to start by painting the floor sections. We're going to use Mournfang Brown, and we are going to do a heavy overbrush. This is a bit like a dry brush, but you have more paint on the bristles of your brush. It's a good way to paint large areas quickly without obscuring all the detail. Then we're going to switch to Zandri Dust, and we are going to do a dry brush. So we're still using a big brush here. We're going to work in circular motions, and we're just going to pick out all of the raised details with this lighter brown colour. Next in the video, I will be switching to a Athonian camo shade to paint in between the lines of the floorboards, because looking at the officially painted miniatures on the cover of the box, there is green in between the boards, but Athonian camo shade doesn't work very well, so I will be doing something a little bit different later in the video. I've just left it in here just to show you that it was something that I tried and it didn't really work. And then I'm going to use some Seraphim Sepia on the main parts of the floorboards. And I'm using Seraphim Sepia rather than something like Agrax Earthshade because I want to enrich the browns and I want to emphasize the detailing, but I don't want these floorboards to be really dark. The officially painted floorboards are quite bright and vibrant. Using Agrax would probably have made everything just a bit too dark for the look I'm going for. Then, when that is dry, I'm switching to Army Painter Speed Paint Orc Skin, and I'm going to reapply this into the recesses around the floorboards to try and get that green mildewy look from the painted miniatures on the cover of the box, and this works much better. Army Painter Speed Paints are something that I have only recently added to my collection of paints, and I tend to use them for little details on things like this. Adding it between the floorboards actually worked quite well. When that's dry, I'm switching to Skeleton Bone, and we are doing another dry brush. This is quite a heavy dry brush, again just to brighten up the floorboards, help to emphasize all those details, but also tone down that green as well. And then I'm going to do a final highlight of Screaming Skull right at the very end. Again, just another extra brighter coat. You don't need to do that if you feel you're already happy with the look of the floorboards at this stage. But with that dry brush, the floorboards are done, and you can see there is still green in the recesses, and the floorboards themselves are quite pale, which is exactly what I wanted. Next, we are moving on to the walls. Of course, we are starting from our Chaos Black undercoat, and the first paint we're going to apply is Avalon Sunset. We are going to be painting these areas of plaster on the walls, and Avalon Sunset is a good base coat to start from. I'm going to apply 2 thin coats. And I'm not too worried about getting it over the surrounding wood area, all of that will be neatened up later. Then I'm switching to Agrax Earthshade, and I'm going to slosh this all over the Avalon Sunset. We are really just trying to dirty up the yellow at this stage, and at the moment this will look quite horrible. Don't worry about it, it will improve. Next, we're using some Mournfang Brown. We're going to water it down about 50% so it's really nice and runny, and we are going to splodge patches of it all over our dirty Avalon Sunset plaster. This is a haphazard thing, there's no reason or rhyme to it. You can apply loads of brown or not very much. You can change the consistency of the brown, you can make the brown stronger and darker if you want to. Doesn't really matter, do whatever you feel like doing. And then we're switching to skeleton bone, and we are going to start doing dry brushing over the plaster in circular motions, and you will need to do several coats of dry brush in this manner. I think I ended up doing 4 on these sections, just to keep layering up that bright colour. And as you apply the layers, you will see that the plaster starts to look much better. And then finally, I'm going to use Ulthuan Grey for a dry brush highlight. If you want to, you can go one stage further and actually do a white dry brush as well, but I left it at the grey for a slightly off-white plaster finish. And that may seem like quite a lot of effort for the plaster, but when you look at it up close, you will see all that mottling, you will see all those different colours and hues showing through your dry brush layers. Next we're switching to Mournfang Brown. I'm going to thin it down and I am going to paint over all of our woods surround. We just need to be careful here not to paint over any of the plaster areas that we have already painted. And you can apply 2 coats if you want to, I didn't bother. Next we're switching to Seraphim Sepia because we're basically painting these walls the same way we painted the floorboards. So I want to enrich the brown, but I don't want to darken it up too much. So Seraphim Sepia is the option I've gone for. Then we're using Skeleton Bone, and we're going to do a dry brush of Skeleton Bone. We have skipped the Xandri dust on the walls just to get a slightly different colder wood colour on the walls. You probably won't be able to tell the difference just eyeballing it on the table, but it should give you just a slightly different hue. And you will notice I haven't painted the sculpted face on the section of the wall here. You can, if you want to, paint that in wood as well, but I'm going to do something different with that to make it look like the officially painted miniatures on the cover of the box. I'm now also going to do a Screaming Skull highlight. Again, this is just a dry brush over the sharp edges of the wall, anywhere where the light would naturally fall. Not being too fussy about it, but making sure we get all of those lovely details highlighted. Next we're going to do the sculpted face, and we are starting with Retributor Gold. We're going to thin this ever so slightly, and we're going to paint this on all of the hair. Again, we just need to be careful not to get it over the plaster. On the cover of the box they have used blue and gold motifs for things like the doors and the sculpted faces, and it looks really good, so that's what we're recreating here. When the gold is dry, we're going to do a Seraphim Sepia wash, just to bring out the recessed shading. And then if you want to, after that, you can reapply Retributor Gold as a highlight. Next we're moving on to the face. I'm using Deep Blue from Army Painter. This is not a speed paint. It comes out of the bottle quite thin no matter how much I shake it, so I will be applying 2 thin coats, and I don't need to actually thin this paint down at all. But I'm going to carefully apply it all over the face. You can use a different blue if you prefer, if you have some Citadel blues you want to use. But after 2 coats of that, I'm using a blue tone, again from Army Painter. This is going to enrich the blue, it's going to enhance the colour, but it's also going to provide some recessed shading over the lips and the eyes. And then when that is completely dry, I'm going to switch to Macrack Blue, which is a slightly lighter blue than the deep blue, and we are going to do a highlight over the nose, across the eyebrows, over the cheeks, just to help bring out those details and make the whole face pop. And you can do a couple of highlights if you want, but I'm trying to do things really quickly here, so a single highlight is all I'm doing. That completes the face, but there's one last thing we need to deal with on these walls. There are some areas where the plaster is cracking away, and you can see the blockwork underneath. You can deal with that exposed blockwork by painting it grey, applying a Nuln Oil wash, and then doing a highlight, but I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use Gravelord Grey, one of the Army Painter speed paints. With this stuff you can just splodge it into the gaps, it will fill in the recesses, it does all of the hard work for you. You can of course if you want to go back and highlight the speed paints afterwards, but I am not going to bother. I'm just splodging it into the recesses where the plaster is cracked away and calling it done. Next up we have the doors. On the box art, some are red, some are blue. We're going to paint this one blue. It's going to be pretty easy. We're starting again from our Chaos Black base coat, and then we are going to use Mournfang Brown, and just like we did with the floors, we are going to do an overbrush. So we've got quite a lot of paint on the brush, and we're just whipping it over the details of the door. It's going to leave black in the recesses and apply brown over everything else. We're then switching to Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to do a healthy wash of Agrax over the whole thing. We don't need to worry at this moment about getting it over the hinges and things like that. Then we are switching to our deep blue, and we are going to do a heavy dry brush of deep blue over the whole thing. If you want to do red instead of blue, just pick a really dark red and do the same thing at this stage. And when that's dry, we're going to switch to Macrack blue, and we're going to do another dry brush just to brighten up the whole thing. If you are using red, again just pick a brighter red than the one you used originally and do a second dry brush. Next we're switching to Retributor Armour, we're thinning it down slightly, and we're going to paint all of the hinges, we're going to paint the door knockers, the handles, all that sort of stuff. Just being careful not to get it over the blue. You can, if you want to, do some highlighting and stuff on that gold. I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to leave it exactly as is, and we're going to move on to Lead Belcher because we are going to apply Lead Belcher to the kick plate at the bottom of the door. Again, I've thinned this down slightly so it goes on easily. Just going to apply one coat, 2 coats isn't really necessary. And then I'm going to use just a little bit of Nuln Oil just on that kick plate because it would be a little bit grubby. And with that done, our door is finished. Next we are moving on to the candlesticks and the lanterns. Again, starting from Chaos Black, and then we're going to use some matte white, and we're going to apply 2 thin coats of matte white over the candle and the candle flame. It doesn't matter if you get it over the holder at all, just make sure you get a good coating of the white over the candle itself. For the lantern, we're also going to be using matte white, but we're just going to splodge it into the central area of the lantern where the light would be. And again, it doesn't matter if you get it over the other bits of the lantern, we'll neaten that up in a little bit. Next we're using Flash Gitz Yellow, and we're just going to very lightly dry brush the tip of the candle flame, so most of the candle flame will still be white, but there will just be some yellow at the top part. On the lantern, we're just going to splodge some yellow on the central mass of the lantern, again where the glow would be coming from. Then we switch to Evil Sun Scarlet, and we just do a very light dry brush on the absolute tip of the candle flame. And when it's done, you should have something that looks like that, which is pretty good. For something of this scale, it looks like a candle flame. On the lantern, we're doing something similar, just a very light stippling of the Evil Suns, just to try and give a sense of heat and warmth and light. Next up, we are using the Holy White Speed Paint from Army Painter. We're just going to apply this to the candle. The Holy White is a really good way to quickly shade something that should be white. If you don't have the Holy White Speed Paint, you can just leave the candle white anyway. And then we're switching to Lead Belcher, and we are going to apply this to the candle holder, and of course we will also apply it to the surround of the lantern. We will then switch to Nuln Oil, 1 coat of Nuln Oil over all of the Lead Belcher we have painted on the lantern and the candle, and then that is done as well. There are a few other accessories in the set, they are very easy to paint. For the stack of books, the pillar and the barrel, I just used the same processes that I used on the flooring. For the luggage, I painted it Mornfang brown, and then I overpainted it with the Army Painter Speed Paint Blood Red, just to make it look like a dark leathery colour. For the scrolls, I also used Army Painter Speed Paint. I started from a white base coat, I used Pallid Bone for the scrolls, Blood Red for the bindings on the scrolls, and then Dark Wood for the base that the scrolls are sitting on. There is also a hanging sign in the set, which isn't in this image here, but I will show it to you in a minute. For that, I just used Retributor Gold, and then I used the Army Painter Speed Paint Magic Blue for the blue detailing. And this is the finished result. You get 6 identical frames in the City of Absalom set, and what you are seeing here is the complete contents of one of those 6 frames. And I think that looks pretty decent, considering it was all done with very simple methods and just a few different colours. On each of the 6 frames you get half of a pillar. You are supposed to clip them together to create 3 complete pillars, but if you want to, you can use just half of a pillar and push it back against the wall, as I have done here. If we take a closer look, you can see on the right hand side we have that gold hanging sign that I mentioned previously, and I think that looks quite bright and warm and welcoming. I'd quite like to go and visit the City of Absalom myself. The doors I mentioned in a previous video, I will repeat it here, are on hinges. They do actually open. When they're unpainted, they are a little bit loose in the hinges. Once they are painted, they are sometimes a little bit stiff, but if you're careful, you can pop them open for your adventurers to peek inside and see what's going on. And there we have it. That is my quick and easy way to paint the City of Absalom terrain set from Archon Studio so that it looks a little bit like the officially painted miniatures on the cover of the City of Absalom box. Thank you once again to Archon Studio for sending this set to me for review, and thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.